Okay. A very warm welcome and good morning to everyone in second day of ADVETCON2021 conference on recent advances in reproductive technologies in wildlife conservation. I am Vinod Kumar from CCMB Lacons. In this session, we have two invited talks. Each talk would be 35 minutes plus 10 minutes for question and answers. I request all the participants to write their questions in the chat box, which will be relayed to the speaker after the talk. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Samashiva Rao, Principal Scientist in CCMB Lacons and co-convener of the conference, to introduce our first speaker of the session, Dr. Samashiva Rao.
Yeah, very good morning to you all. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Chachot Titharam. He is an associate professor in the Department of Companion Animals and Welfare Clinics and director of the Center of Elephant and Wildlife Health, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, Chiang Mai University, Thailand. He got the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Faculty of Veterinary Science at Chulalongkorn University and was awarded his PhD by the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine at Utrecht University, Netherlands. He got the diploma of the Thai Board of Thyrogenology from the Veterinary Council of Thailand. His present work and research focus on reproduction, breeding, genetics, medicine, and management in elephants and wild animals. He is also a member of the IUCN Species Survival Commission's Asian Elephant Specialist Group. Now, I would like to request Dr. Titharam to share your presentation and go on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the organizing committee to invite me, and as well as thank you for Dr. Umapati and Dr. Vinod Kumar for introducing me. Okay, this is my slide. Okay, I think you can see this one already. Yeah. Okay.
You can see, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for the organizing committee to invite me to join this the very important and interesting symposium that I would like to follow on, because it is my field of work as well. But anyway, this is something that I would like to give a talk because Dr. Umapati also think the welfare of captive elephant, that is quite interesting and also really important. And then later on, I would like to imply this one for the welfare to the reproductive technology, especially in the very large animal like elephant. So my topic is here, and as well as my team, that Dr. Pakanut Banasit and Dr. Jaruwan Kurmi from Chiang Mai University, as well as Dr. Janine Browse from Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. So we have worked in this project for the welfare of captive elephant in Thailand for a long time. So next, these are the topics that I would like to give a talk. For introduction, as welfare assessment and factors that relate to the welfare, further studies, implication for the breeding purpose, as well as for the reproductive technology. So first, I would like to give some background for the population of elephants in Thailand. So in Thailand, we divide almost completely, even though they are the same species or not, Elephas maximus. But in Thailand, we have different regulations by their own. So we have wild elephants, which the populations are around 3,000 to 3,500 elephants in the forest, and also with a captive elephant. Now we have just like count the number to be around 3,700, or it can be said like almost 4,000. If you ask why we have the separate populations and separate regulation like this one, because for the wild elephant, we capture them and use in the war and several things like a logging for a long time, more than 1,000 years. I think it will be the same like in India, because you also capture it and use it. And also we have some knowledge, especially something like a gaja or a kuchaban or something like a knowledge for a long time. So let's come to the welfare. So welfare is a broad and complex concept that we use. So that is the thing that it is a degree which animal copes with the challenge from outside. And then after that, if we see, it would be related to the individual and animal point of view. For instance, like a temperament, life and history, age, sex, social, and genetics. So we also have this one. And also one thing that we have to realize and keep in mind that these are all the things of the basic needs to animal. So that's why we try to start with the welfare to the animals. So in the past, we always use the 5 freedom concept, which means that I have a good welfare or not. So I think you all know, from the free from hunger and thirst, free from discomfort, free from pain and injury and disease, free from fear and distress, and free to express normal behavior. Then after that, they start using with the domestic animals, for instance, like a livestock or poultry. But then after that, the people think that also for the wild animals, so it should be, they should have the also for the welfare, particularly in the captive condition, like in the zoo. So that's why they use this one. But later on, they have Mr. Miller and Bassett, they try to initiate with a new concept. So we have the 5 domain models for animal welfare. So start from nutrition, environment, health, and behavior. And all things they combine together, and they are coming to the mental status of the animals. That's why right now in several things, especially for the zoo condition, they use welfare, use 5 domains to assess for the welfare. So the question is, how do we measure the welfare? Let's come to see. First, this come to several things, for instance, like a mortality, fertility, health and disease, as well as behavior. And also one thing that several people know, for instance, like stereotype behavior, that is a head bobbing, weaving, or leg swaying that come into this point. And then after that, we can see that's come quite a lot. There are several risk factors related to the stereotypes, for instance, like inability to express normal behavior, also the shaming for a long time, as well as socialization. And also one thing that we expect that like a predict schedule or not, because for the animals related one, if they have the regularly schedule, so this means they expect something to be with them, for instance, like the food, so there should be no anticipatory for them. And then after that, for the stereotypes, it also reflects of the past condition, for instance, like something that happened to them while they were young, so it can happen when they grow and to be adult. And when we measure this welfare, I talked already for the previous 4 things. What then that relate to this topic, because several people in this symposium, you also work on the reproduction as well as the hormone. One thing that I would like to talk in my talk, that is a stress hormone. So what is a stress hormone? That we always use this one to the welfare measurement. So this is cortisol. For the stress, they divide into parts. One thing that is acute stress, that especially from the sickness and injury or transfer of the animals, even though introduce of the new elephant and also some festival. So we can see that these things also increase. We can see in the 4th figure, like this one, that sometimes when we continue measure of the hormone, and then after that we can see the cortisol hormone increase during this thing happen. And then the second one, that is chronic stress. So for the chronic stress, we have something like a pushing as well as housing in the enclosure, even though for the chaining, or even though in the locking season in several countries like in Myanmar or Thailand. We all know that's something that happened quite a lot. Next, one thing that if we use the cortisol to measure and interpret for the welfare, one thing that we have to very careful and realize that one, because it is some of the normal physiological thing that happen in the animals, especially for the elephants. First, during the month, also cortisol is quite high. During the follicular phase of the estrous cycle, it's also high as well. And during parturition, and also during the calf rearing, and something that it happened already. And then after that, when we measure for the cortisol data, we can use it for the relation to other welfare measurement. One thing that we have to realize that we don't want to eliminate our stress, because sometimes, like you see already, sometimes the stress that is really important, especially when the people like in the panic time. So if you have a stress and very high cortisol, sometimes you can even though lift some heavy thing to carry and try to escape some of the threat. But we have to be very careful to balance this one, not too high and not too low. One of the several welfare studies that have done already, that mostly in the zoo elephant or the Western countries, focus only on one or two factors. For instance, like stereotypes, mobility, motility, food, cortisol, or ovarian cyclicity, that Dr. Jenimbra also spoke already yesterday. So you all hear that. And then after that, we should have something like from the several things that come together, that from the multi-institutional, multi-expertise study, that we should combine together to measure for the welfare of the elephant. One thing that we should see that for the obesity or body content score in the elephant, that we can see from the skinny to obesity very fat. From our study in Thailand, we can see already that it should be ideally, because I think people all around the world think the obese elephant should be really good because they like elephant to be fat, but in fact, it should be in the normal condition, like in the body content score of 3, which is in the optimal one for their health. So another thing that also affects for the health, that is body content score, that I also mentioned about that already. For the sex, the female and male, they are also have a different, especially for the female, they are fatter because of the fat accumulation. The exercise, it should be good for their condition, and some unpredictable, variable feedings. Also, it's also affect to their health too. And one thing that we have done several studies, like for the metabolic health, like insulin, leptin, and glucose, like a high body content score, they would have the poor metabolic health, like for these hormones, and also exercise, they are really good for their health too. Another thing that is food and joint, because if they one thing that affect quite a lot. For instance, like if they stand on the hard substrates, they also have a negative effect. And also with the problem of the foot pad, problem with the nails, with the arthritis, and also with the joint pain, we can see for that one. And also, if you talk about glucocorticoids, this slide also from Dr. Jen Brown yesterday, but also related to my talk about glucocorticoid. One thing that is for the socialization, for the time alone and time on the hard surface, also they have a positive effect to the glucocorticoid. And also for the management, like indoor and outdoor, and more exercise, they will decrease the glucocorticoid. And physical contact, they also decrease glucocorticoid. Interact with the public and also with their group, they also decrease the glucocorticoid. So this thing that from the several studies we all know already, and if we want to give the elephant have a good welfare and less stress, we should go for this one and try to think about the time, about this management that we try to decrease glucocorticoid. One thing, especially in Thailand, because in Thailand we use elephant quite a lot for the tourists. So we use elephant in tourism, and also is also criticized by animal rights group. I think in India also have this one quite a lot. So one thing, if we study, there are the science behind this thing and policy. For instance, like in Thailand, we use elephant for riding and trekking, also for the painting and shows, even though we use them under the chains and use of the equipment to control, like anchors. If you come to Thailand, even though in several of the Asian elephant range countries, or even though in the zoo of the Western countries, you all see this one. These are the stereotype behavior. Also, elephant do like this one quite a lot, a long time. And also, as I said in the previous slide, they also this one reflect from the past. And also in Thailand, if you see this one, it's also happened from the animal rights group that they attack us, because this is one of the zoo in Thailand. They also attack this one. Even though some of the two zoos, as I know, in Switzerland and Australia, they also have this kind of thing that elephant also go into the swimming pool, and also this is something that the people, especially for the children, they can observe the elephant behavior, especially under the sea, under the water. And also this one just come for last month. It also happened that the National Historical Museum, they also announced this one from the zoo that to be the best award, photograph award. That's why we have to reflect them and try to explain to the public for the necessary, and this one for the education. And also this one, even though in Thailand, it also put on the National Geographic News that for the captive elephant that they use in the zoo, or even though in the tourists, this is not so good. But anyway, this is something come from the subjective measurement, and especially from the feeling, not from the scientific thing, not from the scientific improvements. That's why we have to study quite a lot and use the science to approve for this thing that happened. So in Thailand, we also got some grant from the National Research Council of Thailand, and also we set the project by several people helping together. So mainly with the two studies, one that is a camp survey, and another one for the welfare assessment for the tourist elephant in Thailand. So from our studies, we work on 33 elephant camps in three provinces of Thailand, including around 600 elephants. So we study for the camp observation and also questionnaire to the owner and mahouts. And also we want to check for the camp management facility, tourist activities and workload, healthcare, restraints and control protocols, and also for the mahout management. So from the results of these studies, it's come out that hooks and chain used by most of the camps, even though if you don't see, but it doesn't mean that they don't use a hook, but they put in their bag and then use it when necessary. So this means the hook is not used all the time, but they just handle or put in the bag and use it when in an emergency case. For the older camps, they also provide riding with a saddle and shows, and also they house together with a high percentage of the bulls and involved in the breeding program. And for the newer camps, Many of them, they offer no ridings because of the use and attack from the animal rights group, and also spread all around the world, offer more free time to the elephant, and also access to forage near local forests, and less fewer bulls and less breeding, because for the bulls, as you know, they are aggressive and difficult to control. They don't want to hold the bull because it also have a negative impact for their image. So they send these bulls to another place, especially for the logging in the other parts of Thailand. And also for the sex ratio, we can see like a male to female, as you can see, because they don't want to hold the bull for the difficulties, so they send to another place. Like you see, from the younger age, they also have the closer ratio 1:1, but they get older, they send this bull to another place. And also one of our study, we can see like a common health disorders, that is thin or obesity, and also skin wound from improper use of the equipment, nail crack, back swelling, and lameness, corneal ulcer, blood diarrhea, constipation, as well as herpes virus. From the assessment, we can see camp management, and we survey this one for the body content score, metabolic markers, and lipids, wound and food score, behavior, stereotypes, and fecal sample and glucocorticoid to analyze for the stress. For the result, it variation between camp, because these are several different management and different activities. So the mahout, in the place where the mahout use anchors, so 27% of them, or around 1/3 of them, has a wound. So this means even though the mahout carry the anchors or hooks, it doesn't mean that they cause a wound or they use it, but they just carry it, as I said before. And 5% of the elephant in the saddle ridings has a wound. So this means in the saddle, if they use it properly with the good management, they will cause nothing. And for the food problem, around half of them, it also associated with chaining and stereotyping, because they chain all the times and very long time, and also they swaying and have a stereotypy and then cause a wound problems. So for the body condition, 40% of them overweight and obese, and the rate of obesity vary also between camps. It depends also on the tourist activity and also for the food that they give it. Especially for the supplement, for the food, like a banana and sugar cane, it causes higher body content score, because in Thailand, when the tourists come quite a lot, people are saying that elephants eat banana and sugar cane. So they give them quite a lot and cause obesity. And shoulder the riding, because they have exercise, so they have the better body content score. So this means they are in optimized one, and less changing, because they have exercise, walk quite a lot, so they have the better body content score. And also overweight may compromise with metabolic health, for instance, like a blood sugar, like a human. Higher body content score have a higher lipid profile, and also with the fat or obese, they also have an abnormal and glucose and insulin. So this means they have a negative impact to their health. If we were for the recent study, and then after that, we just compare it to the Western zoo, especially in the US. So we can see like for the overweight and obesity in Thailand, that is very much lesser, around half of it. Half of them, they have obese. But if you go to the UK, you can see like a 77%. And also in the US, it's also up to around 70%. And in Europe, because they have the much better condition, so it go down to around 60%, but not like in our range country, much less than that one. And also if you see for the sex and species that of the body content score, male also more, female also much more, and Asian and African left modern elephant, and also in the UK as well. Especially in the tourist season, for the metabolic status, we can see for this that in the high tourist season, they also have very high insulin. So this means like tourists feed them quite a lot, and with a higher glucose and higher cholesterol, but lower glucose to insulin ratio. And other risk factor of the obesity, you can see like they have also with the food and joint problems, arthritis, dystocia related to obesity, because we have a lot like this one, as well as heart disease, diabetes mellitus, and also for the cancer. From the result of our study, we use a fecal glucocorticoid. They have a lot of variable among camps due to the management, and also if they have a wound. So this means because they have a wound and very quite pain, so they have a higher fecal glucocorticoid metabolites. And if they house in the shed, they also have the highest fecal glucocorticoid metabolites. And if they have more working time and distance, they have a lower FGM. And if they no training during the daytime, they also have more exercise. They also have a lower FGM. Keeping in the forest during the nighttime, they also have the lower FGM. So you can see this factor also relate to the FGM result. Next, come for the tourist season. In the higher tourist season, because of higher activities, they also have the higher glucocorticoid metabolite. So in conclusion of the welfare survey, we can see like camps also have differ in the welfare and status of the elephant. Elephant should get more exercise. Like it can be like a walk, even though for the riding is one kind of exercise as well, if we manage them in the proper way. No riding camps should not feed high calorie and treats, because if there is no riding, so this means much lesser exercise. So if the camps also feed them quite a lot in the normal, especially from the tourists, to give banana and sugarcane, it also cause the obesity with the high glucose and insulin. And elephant in the riding program and shows did not have a high stress level, because they also have exercise like in the human. So the medical doctor also suggests us to have a jogging and regular exercise routinely, because it can decrease the stress. So when we have a conclusion for this one, for the good and welfare, we should have this kind of management for availability of water, allow free foraging, reduce high calorie supplements like a sugar and sugarcane and banana, reducing the time on chains, routine food care, exercise, control work intensity, having natural floor substrate, control of overuse equipment to reduce the wound, and also have a good relationship, and especially with the socialized interaction of the elephants. They are social animals. And it's come to be like this one. This is from my student, Dr. Pakanut. So from the welfare outcome, we should have these things that have some of the network together, like our body content score. You can see that relate to the duration training, also for the supplement, and also for the stereotypes type of work, and also for the physiological thing like a glucocorticoid, and also food score or wound score. These are things that we to conclude to have the good for the elephant welfare. For the future ideas, that importance of the social interaction that we should provide to these elephants, elephant-mammut relationship, important of their choice, of their preference, gait assessment, thermal imaging, and bull elephant welfare, especially during the mass period. And also for the implication from our study. So we try to encourage the elephant camps that to improve the welfare of the elephant through the better management practice from these factors that we come from our scientific study that we try to use system, and also to develop science-based guideline for the good practice, even though for the elephant camp standardization for their welfare, and also for the regulations. For right now in Thailand, we have the several regulations come out already. For instance, like standard elephant camp standard, and also welfare regulations for the captive elephants. So next, if because of this symposium also relate to the reproductive technologies, one thing from our result, if they have a good welfare, so this means if people want to get their pregnant, that is the pregnant also breeding, that is one thing of the good welfare, because it also the their behavior like breeding. So one thing from our study, we can see like if they want to have a good breeding success, like to get pregnant, one of the important things they are to improve socialization, because in Thailand, most of the elephants, they have isolation, they tie in the forest or tie with a chain in some place. They don't have much socialization. And from our study, we also improve that in the camps that they have a socialization, they have a good breeding success. And also we suggest to elephant to breed at their early young age, like in 10 to 20 years of age, before the occurrence of reproductive pathologies like irregular cycling, or even though reproductive pathology like a glioma or cystic endometritis hyperplasia that can happen. And for the good breeding records, that is one of the key to understand the factors related to the reproductive success. For instance, like when to breed and when they give birth, yeah, like this one, that is really important. And also in Thailand, that thing that I study for the factors that have a good breeding success. In Thailand, also we use routinely for the natural breeding to produce the calves, but in the alternative way that also developed the artificial technology like artificial insemination. So we got trained from the European like German team to have artificial insemination. So we also working on the artificial insemination in elephants, and also we succeed to get the calf born from natural artificial insemination from the fresh semen. So right now there are 2 calves born from artificial insemination in Thailand, one at the National Institute in Lampang, and another one in Khao Keo Open Zoo in Chonburi province. So another thing that also can happen, because if you have heard from the news, like a scientist, especially from the they want to bring the woolly mammoths, that they want to woolly mammoth to be walk again on the earth. So there were several controversy of this thing to talk and debate quite a lot. One thing in the we also question about this one, because for the large animal like this one, that is too far or not, because right now for the reproductive technology, we also use already artificial insemination, especially for the Western Zoo, because they cannot control and hold for the elephant bull because they are aggressive. So they just use artificial insemination to get the elephant baby. Even though for the in the African elephant, because the population is very high, so they also use contraception in the to control the population. The talk will be by Dr. Ursula Bichat later on. Also, another thing, embryo transfer, or even though IVF, we have to think quite a lot, because these technologies have been used already in domestic animals like a cattle. But for the large animal like elephant, that it's also have any problems and also have something related to the welfare or not, because it's difficulty, and especially cloning of the mammals. So for their idea, they want to get the woolly mammals, and then after that they want to get some of the somatic cell and put also in the oocyte, and then put in the surrogate mom, and then after that they think it would be to get the elephant mammals baby come out to walk on the earth. And also this thing come out just only few months ago. So they have a mammals, and then after that they want to put it like a genome extraction, and also have the genomics engineering, and then put to Asian elephant and also mammals together, and then after that they put it and from the skin cell, and they also put in the eggs, and then after that put in the surrogate mom, or even though they put in the artificial womb, and then after that they want to get into uterus to get a baby come out. But one of the things that even though for you who work on reproductive technologies, you all know this kind of thing that is not easy, and especially for the genetic engineering of the fetus, it also cause of the like a mummified fetus, even though of the mutation that is seen quite a lot, and then after that there maybe have several laws, and especially the mammals that is very big, very large, comparing to the Asian elephant. That one thing I would like to remind for this one, because in Thailand, we have worked quite a lot, and we know for really difficult for the elephant in this socia, even though uterine rupture, that may happen if we put the like a clone of endo mammals in the Asian elephant uterus. It can be like this one. And we don't want to see this thing happen in our Asian elephant because it's really difficult. So in our conclusion, I would like to see that if we have to balance for the animal welfare and also biotechnology development, especially in the large animals like elephant, because it can cause complication. But also we want to see for the elephant conservation, because we want to see it still on the earth for the future. So I would like to acknowledge of this organization that help our project to accomplish and from the long-term studies. Okay, this is my organization. Yeah, thank you very much for your listen and participate in this talk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thitharam, for the wonderful talk. We have some couple of questions.
Okay, you want to read or
I will read. Yeah, I will read for you. Which age or sex class is most stressed in elephants?
First, for the, I think it depends on the for the age. I think it depends on the management, because we have not study work on the age. I think even though for the younger calves, they can have a high stress as well. If they have something like a put on the truck, or they separate from the mother too early, something like that one. And also even though for the adult, or even though for the age animals, they also did that one. For the sex, from our study, we can see like the female elephant also have a higher stress than the male elephant, except during the mass period. Yeah.
Okay. And the next question is, any data is available on what percentage of elephant used in tourism?
A moment. I confused. So the male has more higher stress hormone than the female. Yeah, from our study. Yeah.
Okay. Are elephants provided off time from the activities to help them replenishing? How much off period is enough? For example, how many days? For example, 1 week, 2 weeks?
Mm,
Are elephants provided off time from the activities
okay,
to
yeah.
help them replenishing? If
Okay.
yes, how much off time is enough? For example, 1 week.
I think in the past, like when elephant work, they work just only 5 days, and also they have the like a rest of the time during the weekend, like in the humans. But right now, they work every day, but it depends because the tourist activities they come quite a lot. So we try to have some regulation and also for the standards. For instance, like a work 1 hour and then break for 1 hour and work again 1 hour and break again. Also have the like a lunch time break during the break time. And then after that, it also not so much of the work. So we can see for this. Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, please suggest biochemical parameters to assess acute and chronic stress prediction.
Prediction, but I think I asked for my knowledge. I don't know that we can predict or not, but we just try to see just only for the fecal glucocorticoid, or maybe we can just use serum cortisol, just only that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But also, if we can just like follow them and then try. We can just access. But if you say like a predict that maybe come in the future, it's a bit difficult. We can just see. For instance, like I said before, acute, and I think for the acute and chronic, the best way that we use cortisol, that would be the best. Yeah, because if you said about chronic stress, you can see also from their health. Yeah,
Okay.
like a wound or something like that.
Okay. Have you ever measured feel-good hormone like serotonin? What makes them elephant happy?
No. One thing to let you know for the hormone, like you have to validate them quite a lot, because this kind of hormone assay, it also developed especially for the human, and also later on used for the domestic animal. But for the like exotic species like elephant, that is quite difficult. So this means you have to validate, and also try to see it. If they are the steroid hormone, that is not too difficult. But if these are protein hormones, it's more and more difficult because they also have the different amino acid sequence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone from Mr. Raj Mohan, they have noticed that elephant behavior changes in temples, not only during musk period in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. So what would be the reason for this?
For the elephant in temples, we still don't know much, because we in the past we don't have elephant in the temples, but right now due to the COVID-19, elephants move from camps to the temple because the monk also bought this elephant and go to the temple. So this is our job, try to go to see and help them for the management, especially in the temple, because they have a different management. So probably better to study from India and Sri Lanka. You have a lot in temple.
Okay. The next question is, how long we can preserve the fecal samples in -20 in order to detect the pregnancy and stress hormone?
Okay, this one, if you dry it, like when you collect the fecal samples already, and then after that you should mix it, and then after that you can dry. The best way that use lyophilize or called freeze dry, and then after that, if you freeze and dry it, you can keep it for a long time, even though in the room temperature, but it should be very, very dry. Yeah, because we experienced that already, that even though we dry it and then we keep in the room temperature, but not in optimal condition. So when the mold grow, and then after that, it also affect to the result. But if you don't have the freeze dry, you can also use a hot air oven with the airflow that you can dry it to the power. And then after that, you can keep it very long. I have not experienced, but we can keep it for like 2 or 3 years, and then after that, it's fine to extract later on. Yep.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Thitaram. for the
Yeah.
wonderful talk once again. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for organizing meeting. Yeah.
Thank you. So our next speaker of the day is Dr. Edward Narayan. And I would like to invite once again Dr. B. Sambasiva Rao to introduce the speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Vinod. I'm very glad to introduce Dr. Edward Narayan to the participants. Dr. Edward Narayan graduated with PhD degree in biology from the University of the South Pacific and pioneered non-invasive reproductive and stress endocrinology tools for amphibians. The novel development and validation of non-invasive enzyme immunoassays for the evaluation of reproductive hormonal cycle and stress hormone responses to environmental stresses. Dr. Narayan leads the stress lab, especially in the comparative physiology and endocrinology at the University of Queensland, a dynamic career research platform which is based on the thematic areas of comparative vertebrate physiology, stress endocrinology, reproductive endocrinology, animal health and welfare, and conservation biology. Edward has supervised over 40 research students and published over 80 peer-reviewed research. Now, I would like to request Dr. Edward Narayan to share his presentation and go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Share my screen. So you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So thanks to the organizers, Professor Umapati and Vinod and colleagues. It's such a great opportunity to get together in a virtual world. It's been a very challenging year for all of us. So thank you again. And I really enjoyed the presentation this morning and also last night from Professor Brown. It was very, very good. So I will share my little journey with the conservation physiology and try to give you my perspective. I've said that it's about frogs, but I think it's important to talk a bit about the Australian animals as well, because we've got international audience. So you will see some furry animals. But before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge, so I started from Fiji Islands and then studying the Fijian ground frogs. And then from there, I did a postdoc at Griffith University here in Australia. And then briefly went to Canada and studied goldfish for biomedical science. And then went back to India through the Australian government to Pune University with Professor Graham Purohit and his students doing amazing work in amphibian neuroendocrinology and ecology. And so since then, I've come back to Australia. This is home for me and my young family. And here at the University of Queensland, we have great resources and opportunities for the international students. I've got a couple of students from Sri Lanka and India and Asia. So I'm really welcoming anyone who'd like to work with us. So the presentation is a bit short. I'll try to talk a bit more. Hopefully that will give me an opportunity to make it a bit more conversational. So basically it's about animal well-being, and that's what we are seeing today and yesterday and later today as well. So it's about animal welfare, looking at how we can keep the basic needs of animals when they're being kept with humans. But we also need to be appreciative of the other side of the coin, which is the belief-based systems or culture. And happy belated Deepavali to all of you back here in India. So it's really our intrinsic belief system, which is very important as well, because it upholds our belief to how we interact with animals. So there will be some images and some pictures of livestock as well, because that's very important animals as well. So it's basically coming down to the people's moral responsibility to make sure that we look after the animals, because at the end of the day, they are whether you're companion or whether you're, a zoo animal or you are growing it for some return for money. It's important that the animal as a living being has the quality. And one of the things that we here in Australia are working very hard to improve is the lifetime quality of the animal, whether it's in the zoo or in agricultural settings. You've got animals that have been produced for wool or their hide or food as well. So it's very important that we eliminate the pain and injury to the animal so that the deficiencies of the animals becomes reduced. Now, while I say that it's more important to say this right now, because what we are facing is, like I said, the flip side of the coin with regards to animal ethics. So as researchers, we all know that we have to conduct our research ethically. So we have an animal ethics committee. So for example, here at the University of Queensland, I'm on the animal ethics committee for wildlife animals. So we go through tons of research application every month. It's very important that we are aware of our research and it's ethical. So we all know about the 5 freedoms, which was born through the RSPCA, and it looks at freedom from hunger and thirst, discomfort, pain, injury, and disease. But now, basically, in the last 5 years, what has happened is we are basically moving away from just the 5 freedoms, and we are looking at the mental state of the animal as well. And we're trying to step into the psyche of the animal. So basically what he's trying to tell us. So some of the earlier works of Temple Grandin, it's really important as well in this area. So animals face a barrage of stress, microorganisms, parasites, the housing, transportation. Here in Australia, we have a lot of discussions with regards to, for example, animals, elephants we have in the zoos. How much space is enough for that elephant? How much of activity time is enough for that animal? For a chicken, what's the square foot area that he can stand on? And be able to perform those social interactions, those behaviors that it would normally do. So this is very important. Animal welfare is a very powerful topic. And of course, we've got powerful tools that we are discussing in this conference. So the animal welfare has sort of developed further into the 5 domains. And within those 5 domains, we are looking at the physiological domains. So the nutrition, the living environment, the health and fitness of the animal. So this is the 2020 model. We all know that when there was a shutdown of humans in zoos, the animals were all confused what's going on, and maybe there was more breeding activity in some areas than others, and some loneliness was also there because the animals are very accustomed to living around human beings. So we had similar situations here in Australia as well. It's the interactions with the environment, which basically is a behavioral domain. The interaction between animals. Animals talk to each other. They are so clever. They have such complex systems. They are able to interact with themselves and also with humans. So for example, we have here in Australia, we have got some projects going on looking at the horses which are being used for recovery of humans that have faced some trauma in their life. And horses are able to perceive that mental state of that particular client. And we are doing some research to understand what impact that, because there is a heaviness to that emotion. It's pretty much going to impact on your physical and mental state as long as you are alive. So we are trying to see, whether animals are given the recovery time to be able to not get overburdened from these activities. So stress, it's like a little lecture here. It's a physical restraint, for example, in the Australian livestock sector. For your interest, it's like de-beaking, removing the beak of chicken. It's like, you're removing a fingernail or a toe, mulesing. These are done for specific reasons because parasites are very clever and cheeky. They want to go and attack animals in their vulnerable state, for example, during breeding or in early young animals as well. So some of the things that have been done with the physical intervention, the veterinarian intervention, is actually to help overcome some of these stressors. But one thing that I also want you guys to think about while we are here in this platform is it's not just the physical and metabolic stress, it's also the environment. And I think that's the biggest concern right now with all of us researchers. And, we've seen the climate change forums and a lot of heavy debates around what will happen to animals. Here in Australia, we have got a huge question mark with regards to the future of some of our very iconic animals that we would love to come and hold, like the koala, which is a marsupial. And so heat stress has been a major burden on our animals, and forest fires, droughts have been massive, and it's been a very challenging period for the economy as a whole. So animals are telling us the tale of the state of the landscape, and we are able to tap into that to understand it using certain behaviors. We can look at, in a user-friendly manner, understand what the animal is telling us. And so they might stop vocalizing, they might eat less, or they might stereotypic behavior and things like that. So look, I don't want to say that I'm advocate of minimally invasive hormone monitoring. I think it's a very key player when it comes to solving the conservation conundrum. It's not the answer to all of the problems, and I think we have to be mindful of it as well. But it's very powerful, as we already know. Some of the examples that has been demonstrated yesterday and today as well, it's really amazing. One of the things that I'd like to talk a bit about is the stress side of things, and maybe you guys can get some message from that and have a bit of a chat. So when an animal basically, so we all are living under homeostasis. So I'm happy, I'm giving this presentation and you guys are listening to me, you might have some thoughts. And it's all within homeostasis. So the afterthought is there, but basically what's in front of us right here and right now. And so if there is a bit of a change in that friendly atmosphere, then basically you generate an alarm phase. And this is what the biological stress response in vertebrates and plants obviously also show an acute stress response, which we have seen as well with other researchers in my school. And the alarm phase is basically not a bad thing. So stress is not necessarily a killer unless the factors are overpowering and gonna damage the clinical physiological systems of the animal. So basically you have an alarm phase, and then you might show some behaviors, vocalization. The dog might start yelling, like, it was very cold here in Australia. Last few, we have cold periods all of a sudden, and then the pet is outside, he will knock the window and, hey, let me in, I can't live in my house anymore. So the alarm phase will come, and then overall it will be adaptation. So this is complete fitness, and that's how homeostasis is maintained in animals. But basically what happens, the flip side to the coin is the chronic stress. And this has been a big challenge in all areas of animal science, zoo animals, livestock species. If you have certain stressor which is overpowering, then basically the physiology starts to lag behind. And the systems are the same as what it was in an acute stress state. But basically what happens by now is that the environmental context or the stressor is so overpowering that the animal's physiology, whether it's the immune function, we talk about neutrophils to lymphocyte ratio, or whether it's the stress endocrine system, they all get a bit behind, and they're unable to provide the complete adaptation. And this is the problem, because the animals go through exhaustion, and basically there's a loss of fitness. So this is what we are trying to avoid. And these minimally invasive hormone monitoring tools, and there are other tools as well, like thermal imaging and some of it which we saw earlier in the presentation, can actually be a bit early indicators of what stress the animal may be going through. So if we can capture the early indicators, maybe it will give us enough time to solve the problem. But I guess the question to all of us is, where is our animal sitting in the context of stress right now, whether it's the tiger or the elephant, or the koala. So we have got all of these measures of stress. You can look at simple behavior. You can measure physiological responses, things like heart rate variability. That's quite interesting. Some of the work done by Professor Michael Romero in the US, he's done some really interesting work in looking at heart rate variability in birds, and we're trying to follow up on some of that work in koalas. You can look at the performance indices of your animal, body condition score, which we looked very beautifully in the elephant talk earlier on. And you can look at longevity, even at the level of the DNA, like there's information out there that the telomere length shortens, there's a chronic stress state. You can look at metabolism, but these are complex topics. We need to understand the fundamentals of how these systems operate before we go and start collecting blood and measuring things. And the negative feedback loop is very important, because it's all about turning on and turning off things. And it's from all the way to the DNA, all the way to the protein, and then your behaviors. And it's all systematic. And as long as the animal is given a chance to be able to turn off certain responses, they will be able to achieve that homeostasis. So I'll just give you some examples here from Australia. Hopefully you don't mind. But the thing is, here you can see shearing. So it's like going for a haircut, and it generates an acute stress response. So basically your plasma levels will go up. This is in sheep. And you'll have some hyperthermia, but basically there's no overall effect on health and well-being of the animal. But what actually you can see over here, which is a contrasting example, is a situation where there is a particular parasite sitting on the rump of the animal. And it's basically called a fly strike. And these guys are sucking up the blood. They are basically eating the food. They're growing as well, and they turn into this fly at the end. What eventually happens is, like, it's the same as, if you have too much lice in your hair, you feel a bit, unhappy. But eventually what we also notice here is that there is a barrage of acute and chronic sort of responses. And so you have, immune cell markers, basophils, cyanophils, neutrophils, total leukocytes, everything with the shaded this bar over here. These were the fly-struck animals. But what eventually also happens is that these animals are actually showing a phenotypic effect. So eventually there will be a state of emaciation. When you start to see these things like emaciation or lack of feeding behavior, very severe behavioral activities, some animals become psychologically, the demeanor looks a bit odd. That's the danger point, and you have to be very careful about that. We've seen this, to be able to validate the technology. We have been able to test it against certain things. For example, photosensitization is a big issue in sheep. Basically, what happens during the Australian summer, this particular pasture which the animal naturally eats actually attracts a lot of toxins in their root system. So as the animal ingests this toxin, it's actually starting to interfere with the neurophysiology of the animal, and eventually they start to show issues with their walking, and there's issues on the skin with the skin sloughing. So this then becomes an animal welfare issue. You can see the eyes and the nose and the mouth what will he eat, what he can't see. So it's basically quite a dangerous thing over here, which we were able to see. This was a big project, so it's actually collaboration with a lot of people. And I was a little part of this with my honor student, and we actually showed this using minimally invasive hormone monitoring, that we can actually measure these responses in sheep to be able to show whether they are physiologically responding to a stressor. This example, it's well known, where you will see animals being moved from one place to another. Now, this is like the good tale story on the front cover page, that animals have moved, happy days. And we have a lot of animal translocations being happening here in Australia as well. And in fact, we have a Zoological Association conference this afternoon, in which I'm giving a small talk as well. What we notice is that the physiology will actually tell a bit more story about what the animal might come to expect in 6 months or 1 year's time, because you have the flip side of the coin where the stress response becomes hypomodulated. So things start to go down. The stress response becomes, it's not about everything that goes up, it's like a stress. So the stress endocrine system is three-dimensional. It's like, you have to look at it from different angles to be able to have a very clean understanding of what the animal is going through. Like, you have to then also link it to body condition. So in this case, the androgen and the progesterones of these particular animals were, starting to show some negative effects, and eventually they did not cycle or reproduce. So it wasn't a good tale story. And so I've been lucky in that sense to be able to collaborate with some colleagues with Animals Asia to study Asiatic bears in Vietnam. So we have a very long, friendly relationship with the team in Vietnam. And we had students graduating, and we have some discussion this year as well. Basically, what we did was to see whether the stress response start to go back to baseline. So similar work was done in China, but this was basically me doing the stress side of things. And you can see these bears here are actually in the sanctuary. Very beautiful. These are actually not going to be released back in the wild. I guess they are actually going to be there forever. They have been kept in biofarms. So some of them are like, I haven't seen another animal of, like they are sitting in this 4x2 cage, no sunlight, nothing. This guy comes in the morning, it's like milking a cow. My dad was a cattle farmer, so I know he's milking the cow, and basically similarly, they take the bile, sell it, and it's like a livelihood for the person's family. So Animals Asia is doing a great job in that regard. What we did was basically, one thing that I'm trying to understand now is, can we reverse chronic stress? And I think this comes from the pioneering work of Professor Bruce McEwen and some of his amazing research, which showed that there is a neuroplasticity, and we can actually reverse the chronic state by giving tendering love and care to these animals. And this is one small part of the whole big story, but we haven't answered everything yet. But basically what we see over here is that the bears, when they come back, you start to see slowly, they are actually starting to show normalcy, and it's not a fairy tale ending. There is some that never integrate back with the sanctuary, but you see that the hill is going downward. So that's a good thing. It was very good justification for the sanctuary as well, because you face a lot of activism and people are saying, what the heck are you up to? And are things working or not? But basically it's a very positive one, which is in animal welfare as well. So we have seen this, Professor Brown's talk, and I wouldn't go and repeat a lot of this. It's basically a retrospective. You're looking at in feces. It's so convenient. You can look at, I remember one of my colleagues here actually did some work in Gaushala, actually looking at cattle stress response. That was somebody's PhD work. Amazing research from my own university. And basically, you can do continuous sampling. It's retrospective, and it's not saying that blood sampling is not important. It's very important for certain aspects. But it's very hard to get the blood sample to obtain a baseline reading when it comes to stress responses. And as we know, stress can actually impact on reproduction as well. So what I have been doing in my career is basically looking at the stress physiology side of things and trying to understand whether we can apply it to captive breeding, physiological stress, environmental stress response, some invasive species work as well, like diseases and stuff. It's like a training wheel. So this is where my journey basically began. I was 22, 23 years old. I was sent to this tiny island back in Fiji to go and catch frogs, collect their urine samples, take it to New Zealand, because back in Fiji, there's nothing. There's no lab, nothing. I didn't even see my supervisors. They were in New Zealand. I was just in the island collecting urine. Edward, there will be something in this. And I think that's the same thing that my students are asking me, will there be anything in this fluid? How do you know that? And I had that question, but that belief and the trust that you have with your professors who have actually done the work and similar work. So Frank Moliana has actually done the training in Smithsonian. So when I went to meet him in New Zealand, we validated the work in the endangered ground frog. So taking the boat every morning to the island, staying overnight, collecting frog urine for 12 months or so, going back. And so that was an exciting journey for me as a student. And that's the fun part of being a field biologist or a field endocrinologist, because you get to do all this cool stuff that the plant biologists or chemists don't get to do. And you can see that the frogs eventually bred. So this was during the Festival of Light. Nobody had seen their eggs. And this is during my PhD, actually, more than 10 years, around 15 years ago. And Professor Ketan Christie, my PhD supervisor, is from Punjab, and he's like a hardcore physiologist. And then I have a conservation biologist, Craig Moley, and they're fighting over what we'll do with the eggs. Eventually that has bred. Do we release it back to the island? Because the island is actually impacted by the cane toad, which emerged from South America and was brought to Australia to fight off the cane beetle, sugarcane beetle, but they never met because the beetle comes out at night and the toad comes out at day. They never married, and the toad was a havoc. But this is the endangered ground frog. It's IUCN endangered direct developer, and you can see it's a beautiful nest that they grow. Underbelly of the females will sit on the ground and slowly go underground. 30 eggs, takes 30 days to hatch. Direct baby comes out from the eggs. So it's a lot of work can still be done back in Fiji to study the animals biology. And then when I went to Professor Grama Purohit's lab in Pune, that collaboration was just amazing. We went to Matheran to study the Bombay night frogs. I remember the monkeys taking my stuff, but they were it was okay. But basically, we looked at the urinary testosterone, and in breeding season, Amruta Joshi just completed her PhD. You can see the guarding behavior of eggs, nuptial pads, beautiful landscape, very nice study. And Amruta, hats off to this girl who did such hard work by herself. I was just amazed by the energy and the charismatic nature of the students. It's very, very, it's inbuilt. So what we have also is the stress triangle. You can look at the host physiology, and you can look at the proximate and ultimate factors that affect the animal's biology, and then apply to fitness measures. That's me trying to look at a pit-tech scanner that we use to track the identify the koalas in the zoo. And this is a bilby, and I'll show some data on the bilbies. And so what we have over here is, sorry, I might ask Vinod, I have 10 minutes,
Yes, you have 10 minutes more.
Okay, thanks. So what we have over here, this is just a snapshot showing you that the value of fecal hormone monitoring. Basically, this is a bilby like the Easter bunny here in Australia. So it's like a very famous animal, highly endangered, only a few left in the wild, heavily decimated by cats and foxes, the biggest problem. So we're building a huge fence cutting across the country, which will actually keep the bilbies safe, but it's never 100% full fence proof. What we see over here is that just demonstrating to the zookeepers that, if you have a male that has gone to a show and then he got injured, manually restrained, but still he was a very, attractive one, then they still took him to the school visit. Then they brought in the vet, general anesthesia, manually restrained, and then again. So you can see this underlying variation in the cortisol, which is through feces, it's showing up. And what long-term consequence it may have on the animal's welfare, that's really important to follow up on. You can see this guy was apparently healthy, shows, school visit, nothing much, it's a flat line. This is cortisol, by the way, and again, healthy male. So, you can do these things. I guess the biggest challenge is where do I do this? I guess you've got CCMB and you've got other labs coming up. You've got kits available as well. Polyclonal antibody is basically when you look at the stress response, you're trying to suss up as much as you can in that particular, byproduct, whether it's urine or feces or whatever it is. And it's basically an absolute measure. And it's important to biologically validate it. So, ICT height challenge is not always possible. For example, with big cats here, we actually, the vets were collecting the blood from the tail and they'll give a milk to the big tiger. But still that jab was able to show a response. I don't have the data here. I had some problems with updating my slide this morning. But basically, it's very important to be able to support if you have a new species, you've got so many animals, you want to be able to see whether they have a pregnant female versus non-pregnant, or you have handling stress or non-handling something, so that you can actually show. This is more for the reviewers or people who will read your work, that yes, whatever I'm measuring is a true response to what naturally the animal is showing, the natural biology. And this is the study we did with the Dream World in Australia Zoo. And so these data points also don't mean that Australia Zoo female is more stressed than the Dream World female. No. Basically, some of the zoos have a very hands-on. The zookeeper would actually swim with the tigers and like put his hand in odd places. It's like, they are so attached to these animals. And so they're very hands-on. And so maybe for a big Poda predatory species, you might want to give him more opportunities to perform this, climbing the tree and doing odds behaviors, and that gives it a bit more oomph and energy to have a bit more metabolic response, because that's what it feeds off. It doesn't mean that this is stress. Then we were happy that the zoos here in Australia, they seem to be so cooperative to sharing the results, and we published it. They said, don't hide the names and what this is the result. Show it, and this is really the beauty of collaboration. And you can see this is the bilby example. So comparing the zoos, like you go and stay 14-day quarantine in a zoo, this is similar. These bilbies will be in a zoo, Kurumbi in Dream World, this is like fancy, no predators, nothing to worry about. But then as you open up and go into the wild, you can see the stress response becomes overly massive. So we'd like to do more research to understand the reversal of the stress response. We have got some collaboration going on at the moment as well. One message that I'd like to give to the researchers is to look at the underlying factors, not the ultimate factors. So this is Stephanie Hing, my PhD student who graduated on the Violis, the Eastern Betongs. And she did some amazing research in understanding the stress physiology and the biology of the Betongs, relation to nutritional stress, social stress, and all these other things, and infection as well. So you can see here the parasites present or absent, the stress response was p-value less than 0.05. It's telling the story. It's actually able to show that. One thing that I'm working on right now is stress in koalas. So there's a thing called the koala stress syndrome. They will be found flat on the roadside, very lethargic. And so, is this a sign of chronic stress? We have got good amount of data right now to be confident that to say that, yes, these guys are chronically stressed. They have so much of environmental factors impacting on them, disease, as well as human effects. And so I guess my thing is that we have come to a stage where we need to decide whether we need to keep doing tests in the lab, or we need to maybe look at absolute levels and move on to save another species, because we are studying, like, for example, the stress levels in joeys. So mom will die, joeys are rehabilitated, the mortality rate is 80%, 90%. So there's a lot of research that can be done, which doesn't need hormone measurements itself, but it's basically looking at the behavior and care of animals. So I've got a student from India at the moment, Harsh Pahuja, very smart guy, and hopefully will do a PhD looking at joeys and their stress levels next year. And so the story is, how much stress can a koala bear? And we are seeing that in Australia, there's massive urban development. Houses are going up left, right, and center. It's seesaw between nature and humans, and native animals are being sandwiched in between rapid development. But they are here and they are telling their tale, and we are. I'm not on any corner, and as a academic, you have to be neutral, and we are just trying to use our science to say that, look, we have to be careful. Where you cut more trees, we need to have a clear understanding of what impacts this will have on the biology and the behavior and the survival of these animals. They're quite resilient. So there was a lot of bushfires in the last few years, but some of our native animals actually came back, re-emerged. So they have got this instinct in them to be able to fight off natural events. But as we know, habitat loss is flooring koalas. So I've published some papers to show that the stress response is massively high. So we have the stress response to habitat clearance versus disease, dog attack, vehicle trauma. These are really acute things which might not have any stress response. But you have the state of the environment and the disease. So the state is basically what's around me right now. And if there's no trees, the koala tends to move from one tree to another tree, because there's a home tree and there's a neighbor's tree, because it's like me, I'll go to my neighbor and talk to him. So they do the same thing. And when a mom dies, the family will wail, they will cry for months. And so these things, we have a very strong network with koala rescuers in the country who are trying to every day just go and search in Twitter, koala, you'll see Twitter is like fired up. So, you can see the males are highly aggressive response. Females are happy to participate in shows like the handled females. You can take photographs with koalas here in Queensland, but in New South Wales, you can't take photographs with them. But if she has a pouch young, then you have to be a bit careful not to cause too much stress. So that's another thing we are trying to, with rescuers, that, we need some better protocols to be able to manage that stress in those animals. So this is Renee, who's doing her PhD with me right now on stress response in koalas. This is what the adrenal gland of a koala looks like. So this is where the hormones are produced from. So in early days, they were basically using this as a sign, but by then there's a dead animal in the fridge or the freezer. This is the brain and the spinal cord. You can see it's got a very tiny brain. But basically it's a wealth of information, and the koala genome is already available. And last week, they have, the researchers have just released the whole genome of various animals with different conditions, which we can tap into understanding the stress physiology as well. So, and then you can see this is the local news in which we appeared as well. Our latest thing is to be able to track stress levels in hair. So I know Professor Amapati is also doing some very amazing work in these areas as well. So we can track the hormones in hair and trace it back to the context of the state of the environment. I think that is a very powerful tool, and I've got some samples from across New South Wales with the urban development in the last 5-10 years, and we can trace it back. And the hormones are quite preserved in them, and I've seen there's been research in other historical collections as well. So that's where I will sort of end my presentation. And there's lots of projects. COVID has dampened our current situation, but there is definitely hope for students to come and do some research with us and for cross-share collaboration. I'm happy to host experts from here to our lab as well. And I think the hormone monitoring, the field of minimally invasive hormone monitoring, when I met John Cochran and crossing off with Professor Brown and Cornelie Munro and Sue Walker and others, 15 years, like that, during my PhD, that will stay with me forever. And I think that's what we always, like students in the crowd, you don't know where this will take you. So keep believing in what you're doing. I think the field has a very strong future, and we can work together and make it happen. I would like to thank my collaborators and funding body. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Narayan, for the enlightening talk. So we have one question from Raza Mohan. Is there any kit available to identify the level of stress hormone in the field, especially for forest staff during rescue operation?
That is a very, very good question, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to have immediate, response. I am aware of something that was being developed in some cat species. It's hopefully gonna be available, in the near future, or I don't know, maybe Vinod might be able to say something around that. But this is something that it's not impossible. I guess the question is then how accessible you are to the lab resources. So I've got students. I was approached by some students, who wants to study fishing cats, and I guess the question is, maybe you don't always need to measure the hormone. There are other ways. You can look at the behavior, or measure other things to be able to index stress. But you have the technology and the money and it's and the time, then definitely it's more powerful for you. So I wish you all the best in your research.
Great. So the next question is from Dr. Umapati. How do you think climate change will affect stress physiology?
Professor, you have asked me a very tough question, but I guess this is what we are already facing now. So I think here in Australia, we are already talking about whether koalas will be here with us in the next. So we're talking at 2050, 2030, 2050. So the impact has become ever more increased. So we are seeing that in the stress hormones that we are measuring, that it's actually starting to go up and up. Everything works around homeostasis, like Bruce McEwen and other forefathers of stress have said that you work around homeostasis, and by now we have maybe gone to the upper threshold of the allostatic response, and so it's other fall down the hill and yeah. So I think the power is in the hands of mankind, and we are. I guess more challenging is now to tell our leaders to do something about this, because as researchers we will keep doing the same thing, show the same thing, but it's all going around in circles unless the people in the power does something charismatic.
Okay, Dr. Karthik have raised his hand. So Dr. Karthik, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, thank you, Vinod. Wonderful talk, Dr. Narayan. I really
Thanks.
enjoyed the talk, and particularly the work on amphibians, because I'm a herpetologist, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing with researchers in India and your PhD as well. So in this context, I just wanted to ask.
Sorry, your voice is cutting off. I think you're muted.
Causes, and regularly swabs are being collected from the skin to test for the pathogen, whether the pathogen loads are there on the skin of the frog. So you have you used the same swabs to look at stress levels and find out, because you mentioned there is a situation of chronic stress associated with parasites or pathogens.
Karthik, no, I got the question. I think that's I haven't seen any papers yet, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any papers where they've looked at in frogs from the swabs itself, because that would be really cool, because it's very hard to get urine samples from. Like the Bombay night frog was so tiny. I remember Amruta, Bechari Amruta, she had to take samples from the cloaca and then be as careful as she could. So it was very hard. But if you are doing something like that, we can talk about it on email. You have my email address.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Dr. Umapati have raised his hand. Please unmute yourself and ask question.
Yeah, to Karthik and Edward. Recently, Rachel Sentelmayer from CS published paper on, in fact, I spoke to Karthik also regarding this one. Same swab can be used assessing reproductive physiology and sex physiology. It's very well possible.
Okay, so yeah, that's really nice.
Okay.
Yeah, they use a swab to wipe 4 times in a particular location, repeatedly same location, same time kind of thing. So the swab can be used to extract metabolites, and she already published, and we are aware of that. So it is very well possible the metabolites also comes out from skin and can be assessed for both reproductive and sex physiology. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions. If panelists have any questions, can unmute themselves and ask questions.
Can I ask a question, Vinod? Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Dr. Edward Narayan, I just wanted to know, you mentioned about reversal of chronic stress, and you mentioned that several people are working. In terms of the theory of the cascade of events that follow after the onset of chronic stress, do you think this is possible, or what are the real hurdles in achieving a complete reversal of chronic stress?
Yes, I think that's a really good question. There may never be complete reversal of the biological state, because biology is a nexus of many things. But I think what we are seeing here is a specific neural regeneration. So there's a specific regions in the brain which start to show more neural activity with the proper long term. It takes a lot of tendering, love and care. So you provide that to the animals. The animals may show behavioral responses as well. So it is possible. I guess this would be interesting to demonstrate in some of the animals that we study. But I think there is some work being done in livestock, at least, around stress and chronic stress.
If we don't have any more questions, then I would conclude the session here. Thank you so much, Dr. Edward and Dr. Thitaram, for the enlightening and the wonderful talk.
Thank you.
And we'll be back after, we'll take 10 minutes break, and we'll be back after 10:47 Indian Standard Time. Thank you so much for attending this conference.